a few words about how I got started. And it has a lot to do with happiness, actually. When I was a very young child, I was extremely introverted and very much to myself. And kind of as a way of surviving, I would go into my own very personal space, and I would make things. I would make things for people as a way of, showing them my love. I would go into these private places, and I would put my ideas and my passions into objects, and sort of learning how to speak with my hands. So the whole activity of working with my hands and creating objects is very much connected with not only the idea realm, but also with very much the feeling realm. And the ideas are very disparate. I'm going to show you many different kinds of pieces, and there's no real connection between one or the other, except that they sort of come out of my brain. And they're all different sort of thoughts that are triggered by looking at life and seeing nature and seeing objects and just having kind of playful, random thoughts about things. When I was a child, I started to explore motion. I fell in love with the way things moved. So I started to explore motion by making little flip books. And this is one that I did probably like when I was around 7th grade. And I remember when I was doing this, I was thinking about that little rock there and the pathway of the vehicles as they would fly through the air, and how the characters would come shooting out of the car. So on my mind, I was thinking about the trajectory of the vehicles. And of course, when you're a little kid, there's always destruction. So it has to end with this gratuitous violence. So that was how I first started to explore the way things moved and expressed it. Now, when I went to college, I found myself making fairly complicated, fragile machines. And this really came about from having many different kinds of interests. When I was in high school, I loved to program computers, so I sort of liked the logical flow of events. I was also very interested in perhaps going into surgery and becoming a surgeon, because it meant working with my hands in a very focused, intense way. So I started taking art courses, and I found a way to make sculpture that brought together my love for being very precise with my hands, with coming up with different kinds of logical flows of energy through a system, and also working with wire. Everything that I did was both a visual and a mechanical engineering decision at the same time. So I was able to sort of exercise all of that. Now this kind of machine is as close as I can get to painting, and it's full of many little trivial endpoints. Like there's a little foot here that just drags around in circles, and it doesn't really mean anything. It's really just for the sort of joy of its own triviality. The connection I have with engineering is the same as any other engineer, in that I love to solve problems, I love to figure things out, but the end result of what I'm doing is really completely ambiguous. That's pretty ambiguous. The next piece that is going to come up is an example of a kind of machine that is fairly complex. I gave myself the problem, since I'm always liking to solve problems, I gave myself the problem of turning a crank in one direction and solving all of the mechanical problems for getting this little man to walk back and forth. So when I started this, I didn't have an overall plan for the machine, but I did have a sense of the gesture and a sense of the shape and how it would occupy space. And then it was a matter of starting from one point and sort of building to that final point. That little gear there switches back and forth to change direction. And that's a little found object. So a lot of the pieces that I've made, they involve found objects. And it really, it's almost like, it's like doing visual puns all the time. When I see objects, I imagine them in motion. I imagine what can be said with them. This next one here, Machine with Wishbone, it came about from playing with this wishbone after dinner. You know, they say never play with your food, but I always play with things. So I had this wishbone, and I thought, it's kind of like a cowboy who's been on his horse for too long. And I started to make him walk across the table, and I thought, oh, I can make a little machine that will do that. So I made this device, linked it up, and the wishbone walks. And because the wishbone is bone, it's animal, it's sort of a point where I think we can enter into it. And that's the whole piece. That's about that big. It's also very much, this kind of work is also very much like puppetry, where the found object is in a sense the puppet, and I'm the puppeteer at first because I'm playing with an object, but then I make the machine which is sort of the stand-in for me, and it is able to achieve the action that I want.